Okay, so we have 15 minutes. It's a very short kind of discussion session, and I want to open with sort of a game. I thought it was really interesting what Mark was talking about, this analogy to a chess game. And usually when you play chess, it's about the mastermind, and it's a one person, right? One mind, that singularity of concentration and focus, playing the game to win. But here is more about collaborative effort, and as you know, this year we are borrowing from the prefix "re" as our theme. So I want to start with Anders and go down the row with each of you giving us 3 words you can think of right now. Just 3 words starting with "re."
Starting with
Re, R-E. Okay. So like, you know, rethink, reconstruct.
repurpose,
Okay, repurpose,
rethink,
rethink,
reflect,
reflect. Very good. Next.
I think reinvent,
Reinvent,
reinterpretation,
reinterpretation.
reinvent again.
Okay, I didn't give you the rule that you can't repeat, but that's good. Okay, reinvent, 2 reinvents. Boonserm?
And only one word, and re-sustainability. Re-sustainability.
Re-sustainability. Only 1. Okay, everyone's breaking the rules. Mark, you have to be a good student.
So I have 3. I have reflect also. I have remind. And then the third one is actually the Chinese word "zai," is "zai jian," goodbye.
Okay, he's showing us how good his Chinese is. 再见. But 再见 is interesting because it's re-see. Re-see you. To see you again, that means goodbye. Okay, I was going to do something else with these words, but maybe we start with Lyndon's question and then we'll come back to this.
I guess my question is less of a game, probably a bit more serious in nature, so you don't need to take it seriously. I kind of want to deal with the notion of palimpsest and pentimenti in a lot of all of your work, right? The idea that you guys are actually not scared of erasing a part of history in the things you do, be it collaborating, last work, collaborating with other peoples, or even collaborating with dead architects, dead old typologies, many different challenges. I'm reminded of a phrase by Svetlana Boym, the Russian scholar, when she says, perhaps we have to think, in this world we have to think, we have to approach ruins with a different logic. Perhaps it's not melancholic. Perhaps it's not Baroque. Perhaps it's not necessarily the modern modern composition that we're so used to, but the toleration of disharmony. I really like that. So I'd like to ask you guys how you deal with this whole notion, because I see in all the work from Anders Kavrat with all the new companies. For you, definitely. I was surprised, actually, sort of your trajectory in terms of your work and typology and the changes. Boonserm goes without saying. The sort of toleration of disharmony, 50% by architect and 50% by all the other things. And Mark surprised me completely with the breadth of work in terms of collaborating. Now I realize if we're too busy as a practice, I'm going to call on Mark to collaborate actually here. But how do you deal with this toleration of disharmony? And I'd like for you guys to share to the public this idea of, palimpsest and pentimenti, which is that sense of forgiveness.
I think it's funny that I started with "I think," because what I wanted to say is, sometimes when you think too much, it just stops you from doing something. And I think we are part of a flow, yeah? There is always like creative people adding something to this flow, and we are just a moment in time in this flow. And I'm teaching a course now in Berlin in the UDK, and the motto of the course is do before think. because there is often a case when you deal with student, and when you deal with design student, it's almost not in a reality, the context is not reality, because design, in my opinion, is part of reality, and this is where we get inspiration, and the effect we have on reality is the context. When you take this context into university environment, it's often really hard for the student to react. So I always tell them, do before think. And into your question, I think if you, in a way, if you consider too much the flow or what has been done before you, it's the responsibility is almost, how can you actually add to it or actually change something? And I think sometimes it's too heavy, and you just have to react and just, do something. And it could be, it's whatever your inspiration, either be innovative because of environment or because of challenges or because of constraints, or just other aspect that you find in your work. But I just really think this kind of doing and acting, it's really important.
Okay, Anders is ready.
Just on Shay's, also you're talking about reinvention. I think also as a business, I don't know, now I'm not running a creative studio, but it's also, I think also how the world is transforming a lot at the moment. And of course you're coming from somewhere, but you just need to transform. You need to also stay relevant and in a way question yourself. Look in the mirror and keep, in a way, reinventing yourself. And I think that way you are, and the day we also said to my organization, the day you think you're standing on the top of a mountain and you are amazing, then it's kind of over, then you're going downhill. So you need to keep moving, you need to keep challenging yourself, and the world is getting more and more difficult to operate in, I think. It's getting more complicated, or maybe it's turning back to when I was a young man in the 70s. Things are starting to move, especially from a European perspective, that things are really, so there also I think it put pressure on the need for transformation, like both in physical, in objects and what you're doing and what you're producing, but actually also mentally, that you need to transform as a person.
Thank you. Boonserm?
When I think about and when I work it, I think that I have to forget everything that I have learned. Because if we remember, sometimes it's like it, and I cannot go out of the rule. So after that, I think when we make it, we use the common sense. If it makes sense, I do. If it doesn't make sense, I don't do. This is like the intuition from the human inside.
All right.
These are great comments because from your questions, I think we're all participants of culture in a way that we make culture, but we also are observers of culture. And not that these two acts are different, but what Shay talked about, I think it reminds me of what like Paul Klee said, can you think with your hand and do with your brain? Like he's playing this kind of, can you change that? And sometimes to read whatever we're reading, or is having that privilege of being slightly an observer first before you participate again, And I think as a palimpsest, as in history, there's sometimes history is a straitjacket and sometimes history is a springboard. So maybe in the 70s or at the end of orthodox modernism in architecture, at least, history was a straitjacket. People have to get out of it, And sometimes you need to forget, You need to forget so that you can remember again. So, but I feel that in recent years, I think with information technology, now we can have information, we can have images wherever we want to. I feel the next generation really sees all the information as quite parallel, And I see them looking for meaning. They're looking for structure to make sense of all these things, So I think there's a way when history comes in that is not coming from the top to tie your hands, but coming in to give you meaning and give you a structure to understand. And when I see Anders talk about Sacha, the heritage brand, I thought that was fascinating to me. Not because I don't know it, but I thought it brings up a history, whether it's directly related to the current projects or created to a larger scale of history. I thought that was very fascinating for me, that a company would take on something like that, you know. So I see that as a
Yeah,
very
that was new to me, actually, when I was surprised because I realized that's a big challenge. I was actually thinking to myself, what is Anders going to do, right? But it's enlightening to hear all of you, to see this whole new plural modernity, I call, wherein we're not encumbered by the modernist, not to disrespect the modernist sensibilities, because that's important, but this messiness that is represented in the work here. I mean this in the most respectful and honorable sort of accolade that I could give, because through messiness, and yet, perhaps through messiness, what I mean is that you can actually find solution in this broken world, because this whole being precise, being so pure, being such a spectacle, and being an object is no longer relevant.
And I think the prefix "re" presupposes a past first. Otherwise, you wouldn't be reing anything. But let's say you remember all the "re" words that you just gave a while ago. If you were to pick one "re," but imagine your future, how would you define or expound that? So I think we will finish with that, and then we'll go to 再见. Starting with Anders.
So I'll take one of my R's. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I love the word reflecting. I think also this about, and transforming. So projecting the future, reflecting. A big word. Maybe it's a banal word, but I think the future for myself and my business is actually also being here today is a conversation and the interest of the. We were just talking also, we're just starting in the US and very active in the US with 4 locations. But in a way, reflecting about what is the US, what's the conversations, understanding. So I think this exploration, reflecting and conversations and being interested and curious about the world, I think that's probably my future and my business future.
Wonderful.
I also gonna borrow reflect, because I think it's not just, of course, the situation and the context where you walk in, but also reflecting about yourself and going deep, understanding, because there is so much going on in the world and everything is really fantastic. And this question that I mentioned before, that when we graduate and we say, how do you add to this masses of creativity? I think it's still relevant nowadays, even probably more, because the world become more global and the quantities are insane. And if I think a creative person does not reflect what's the meaning and what's the deeper flame that make you create stuff, I think that's the core of the interest in a way.
So 2 for reflect. Wow, okay.
In the past, I talking about a 50% design. In the future, we looking for to reduce it. Maybe 20% design, or maybe 0% design.
Well, reduce 25% to 25%.
It means like, and we don't build the building, but we build the program for it and the part that human build, like that.
Interesting.
So
Mark.
when I was preparing this, I was looking at all the images of our own practice, and it's like seeing your past flash through your eyes. It's like before you die, you see your whole life flashes through very quickly. But I found that completely liberating, because when I think of Zaijian. It's about saying goodbye to yourself. And for me, it's a very liberating moment. Oftentimes when you start your career, you always think about how do you continue what you do. It's always about this continuing, how do you expand. But I think for me, being able to say goodbye is extremely liberating. I feel excited again, and I'm resituated the world again in a very different way.
That's a really
Very
great
good way to
note.
end.
A really great note to not end. 我们还不说再见，因为现在只是去吃饭，然后下午 so we're not saying goodbye, but we're only going to have a lunch break, and then we will reconvene here at
2点。
2点钟。请大家2点钟准时回来。